All right, we're going to continue in our series of Ecclesiastes, the pursuit, chasing meaning under the sun. And we're going to be in chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 12 through 26 tonight. And we're going to call this one this evening, The Man Who Hated Life. As we look at this book, and we have made comment after comment about this as we've been going through these verses, you could say that Ecclesiastes is a book of human disillusionment. It is Solomon's confession of failure. Solomon is obviously frustrated, and he's frustrated because of the fact that he can't find any fulfillment under the sun. And that's his frustration that's there. And here's a man that has experienced everything. He had everything that anyone could ever imagine except contentment. He could not find true contentment. And therefore, in frustration, he says, and this is recorded in chapter 2, verse number 17, it says, "Therefore I hated life." The word frustrated, and this is speaking and coming from someone that is truly just frustrated with life. He's frustrated in general with everything that he has tried to pursue. He is finding frustration. And the word frustrated is from the Latin term frustra, which means in vain. And when a person is frustrated, they feel like all they do is of no avail. I know there's been times where I've been frustrated and I've had to step away and walk away from a situation. You ever been like that when you've tried to put something together? I know with Titus, he got a bunch of Legos for Christmas, and we sat at the table, and there was times I was putting those Legos together and trying to pop those things on, and I'll tell you, I just got frustrated with them, and I just had to lay them down. Just lay them down on the table, walk away for a little bit, and come back with a fresh perspective on what is to happen. But frustration is something that can happen to any of us. And when frustration sets in, it makes us feel like we're not accomplishing anything. There's nothing that's happening that's making any type of sense or purpose. And no matter how hard a person works, or no matter how hard Solomon thought he was doing things, nothing happens of any type of significance. And I like this, and this is key for what we're talking about here tonight, is frustration is the thwarting of purpose. I really believe that, because frustration can cause you to lose your purpose, your focus on what you are supposed to be doing. It reminds me of a passage in Ezra chapter number 4, and this was in the rebuilding of the temple and the walls there, and there were Samaritans that were bringing some discouragement to the people building the walls. And verses 4 through 5 says, "Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia." Now, why did I bring this in? Why did I say that? Is because they were trying to frustrate them in their purpose, trying to get them to be deceived, trying to get them to be discouraged. And I believe that with Solomon, what we see in the beginning parts of this book, the book of Ecclesiastes, is we see a man that is depressed. He is discouraged. He is looking for joy and contentment from things under the sun. And we know that's not where that will be found. A little bit of humor here. Someone described it this way: irritation is when a man calls you on the phone at 1 o'clock a.m. and says, "I want to talk to Jack." You tell him he has the wrong number, and to get back in bed, it's late in the morning. It's too early. Well, aggravation. So we see irritation. Well, here's aggravation. At 2 o'clock a.m., Another person calls asking for Jack. But here comes not only the irritation, the aggravation, but here's the frustration. It's 3 a.m. and the phone rings and you answer and someone says, "Hello, I'm Jack. Did anyone leave a message for me?" Do you know who the most frustrated person in the world is? It's this type of person who has just purchased a new boomerang and can't seem to be able to throw their old one away. That's the frustration part. A little bit more funny here. A woman called the police station to report a skunk that was in her cellar. The police told her that there was something that she could do and that she should do it and try to get rid of that old skunk. The police told her to make a trail of breadcrumbs from the basement outside of the yard and wait for the skunk to follow that trail to the outside. Well, the next day, the frustrated woman, she was still frustrated. She called the police station again saying, "I did exactly what you told me to do, and now I have 2 skunks in the cellar." But frustration, the frustrating part of looking for meaning and not being able to find it. And that's what we see here with Solomon. But when we think about this, it's all a matter of perspective. If all a person sees is the obvious, then you will miss the significant. And this is what it talks about here in verse number 16. It's for there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is. See, our perspective must be one in which God is taken into consideration. It can't be just looking at something and thinking, well, this is it. We've got to take God into the equation. We've got to see that there's more than just this life. There has to be something more, and that's what people have been trying to solve for as long as man has existed. The meaning of life. And the meaning of life is to follow after the ways of God and to have that relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are the important things. So tonight, I want us to look at the man who hated life. Well, number one, he's talking about hate that the wise are no better in the end than a fool. He's speaking here in verses 12 through 17. Let's just go ahead, we'll read these together. And I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the man do that cometh after the king, even that which hath been already done? That I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceive that one event happeneth to them all. Then said I in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so it happeth even to me. And why was I then more wise than I said in my heart that this also is vanity? For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So what's going on here? What's he talking about? Well, everyone winds up dead, and one corpse is no smarter than the other. This is what he's speaking of here. A person's education will not help them when they die. They can have every degree that is presented by man today, but that will do no one any good when death comes. Now he looks at it here and he says the natural man has 3 choices as how to live, and we see this here in verse number 12. He speaks of to live wisely, wisdom, intellectual pursuits, pursuing those things of knowledge and pursuing those things that people today look for, they long for. But also he talks about to live wildly, of madness, wantingly, reckless abandon, no self-control. tempting God, raving with self-conceit. He says this is another way that a natural person, the natural man, has three choices on how to live. And then also he says to live witlessly, folly, to live in a foolish whim, infatuation, impulsively, ravishly. And no one could match Solomon in the ability for self-gratification. He was the epitome of this. He was the poster child. He was the one that when you heard about this, his face is who you would see, because no one could match what he was able to do. Solomon tried it all. He had it all. He had more pleasures to taste, no more sins to sample, no more buildings to construct. So life lost its appeal. And this is what happens here with Solomon. It's said of Alexander the Great that he sat down and cried because there were no more worlds to conquer. That's what some have said about Alexander the Great historically. But not only he speaks about the natural man or person has three choices, how to live. He says they're given a choice. And according to verse number 13, he speaks about that wisdom is better. Look at there again. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. And then he says here in verse number 14, he said, the wise man's eyes are in his head. See, the wise man looks where he is going. A wise man looks at things and takes all things into consideration and makes the best decision. He considers the consequences of what he does. This person considers, okay, if I make this decision, what will be the outcome? If I choose to go this way, what's the outcome of that? And his head controls his direction and not his heart. And then we see here also, the fool walketh in darkness. And a fool is like a person who is blind. Look what it says here in Proverbs 4, verse number 19. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble. So a fool is like a person who is blind. They don't know where they're going. They're going to stumble. They're going to fall. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to end up in a situation that they don't want to be in. And then not only does he look at the choice and sees wisdom is better, but also, where does my wisdom get me when what happens to the fool happens to me in the end? Interesting, isn't it? Look what it says here again in verses 14 and 15. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. Then said I in my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise than I said in my heart that this also is vanity? Now, it's frustrating when you consider that some consequences can be avoided through wisdom. There have been a lot of poor choices that have been made by people, not just now, but in the history of civilization, that have been made by poor choices because they did not seek wisdom. But death is one consequence that both the wise and the fool actually have in common. And this is what Solomon is speaking about here. The fool takes drugs. The wise doesn't. But guess what happens in the end? Both die. The fool lives recklessly. The wise is careful. But guess what? Both die. The fool spends his money on ritualist living. The wise is thrifty, but both die. To know what makes life truly meaningful, you need something that can take you beyond the unavoidable reality of death. And education can't do that. Just like I mentioned earlier, you can have all of the post-hole digging degrees, PhDs, that you want. You can have all the degrees that you can imagine, and that's great. But an education, a degree, will not bring you salvation. It won't. Heard one time a person say this. It said, we have so many doctors in the pulpit sometimes, and up in the colleges and seminaries, it seems like God needs a doctor of some kind with all these people getting these degrees. And I'm not against that because I've pursued degrees myself. But an education does not bring us joy. But you can take the unavoidable reality of death because it will happen. And the only way to find true meaning is through Jesus. To find the true joy is through Jesus Christ. But also this, he goes on in verse number 16, and he says, who cares about my wife's choices 25 years after I'm dead? Now, when we look at this, and we're going to touch on this in the very end, this is a very just dark, depressing set of comments that we see written by Solomon, okay? Look what it says here in verse number 16 again. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? Now, how we want to be remembered after we're dead. Well, we hopefully, after we're gone, we want to leave our legacy. We leave our legacy with our families. We leave it with our friends. Pastors leave legacies with people that they have ministered to. And there's so many things we'd like to leave. Now, tombstones are made of granite, and they're not made of cardboard, obviously. And tombstones have names engraved, not written on a piece of paper and taped to the surface, but they're there for a purpose. I'm always prone to speak about this oftentimes at gravesides when I'm speaking, and there I'll often or sometimes share this story of a little boy, and he's with his father, and they're walking around the cemetery, and as they're walking, the little boy kind of gets curious. Almost in my mind picture Titus when he was younger, because he was just curious about everything. He'd point and ask. His favorite thing to say was, "What's this? What's this?" He would say that about everything that he would see. And so this boy's with his father, and they're in the cemetery, and he's walking around, and he's pointing, and finally he comes to like a tombstone that's above ground. Oftentimes we don't see those anymore. We see them more in the ground, and cemeteries do that now because they think it's easier to mow. It's easier to mow over than to mow around. But as he's there, he's asking questions, and the dad takes this opportunity to share with his son important things about that tombstone. He said, okay, that's their name. He said, those are some pictures. Maybe they were married, and talks about that. And then he sees the numbers there. And he said, these are really neat numbers too. This is the year that they were born. This is the year that they passed away. But he said also, most importantly, there's a dash that's there. And that dash represents so much. That dash represents the people they impacted, the situations and experiences that they encountered. And then when I'm there at the gravesite, I always share about the most important thing in that dash is the day they trusted in Jesus. Because somewhere along the line in that dash, they trusted in Jesus, their personal Lord and Savior. But here we see that this person is engraved. They're remembered by their tombstone, and you have family that go visit this tombstone, and we often see this with decorations where they'll go and they'll decorate and they'll remember, and they have a time of just reflection about the people's lives that have passed on. But also, Egyptian pyramids are an illustration of commitment in preserving the memory of the dead. I've been to Egypt. I went there close to 15, 16 years ago. And I remember going there and seeing the great pyramids of Giza and seeing the Great Sphinx and seeing all these things for the first time being there. And it was just overwhelming to see that. But the Egyptians had a way of preserving the memory of the dead by doing these great, huge, they're huge. I don't even know really what the word to describe it is, but the way that they built them, they were so intelligent at how they did it, and the way that they used to, many, I guess it's historians, I guess in Egyptology, talked about how the pyramids actually, at a certain time of the day when they were first built, the sun would hit the pyramids and it would reflect off the sun with whatever substance they put on them. But it was just amazing, and they were very intelligent individuals, how they built things and how they built traps to capture grave robbers and all that stuff. It's interesting when you look at the history of the Egyptian people. But the Great Pyramid in Egypt is nearly 500 feet high. And I wish I'd have brought a picture. I've got a picture of me standing on a little bit. I didn't go all the way to the top. That'd be dangerous. But I did go up in a little ways and got my picture taken on of those when I went all those years ago. But the Great Pyramid in Egypt is nearly 500 feet high and contains about 2,300,000 blocks of stone. That's a lot. Now, many people wonder how they built that. Well, the Egyptians were very smart. Very likely that the Israelites were used as slaves to help build these things. It's very possible, very likely. But each one of these blocks weighs about 2 tons. Now, during that time, that was very advanced in technology of how to move things and how to get things to different places. However, with all those neat, interesting tidbits of information we just talked about, how many people can name the pharaohs who are buried there? Well, we know one probably, obviously. We know King Tut. We always hear King Tutankhamun. That's his real name, Tutankhamun, King Tut. There's the Valley of the Kings. They have a museum there. I've been there and seen some of the kings that they have on display in their sarcophagus, and their bodies are laying there in state. But how many how many pharaohs can you actually name when we think about this? We hear of Egypt, but how many can you name off the top of your head? But they're all but forgotten. I mean, it's not something that we really just talk about on an everyday basis unless you're a historian. Also, think about this just for a moment. A pail of water. You place your hand in a pail of water, and then you remove it, and what happens? You watch that hole where your hand was, what happens to it? It quickly disappears. And see, when we die, the sense of our place on the earth will disappear also about that quick. Because once we're gone, yes, we'll be remembered, but as time goes on, that will happen to us as well. We'll soon be forgotten here upon this earth. Look what it says here about verse number 16 again. He says, "How dieth the wise man? The same way a fool dies, your IQ and your academic degrees won't be inscribed on your tombstone." Psalm 49 verse number 10 says, "For he seeth that wise men die, likewise the fool and the brutish person perish, and leave their wealth to others." So that leads me into this next thing here that he talks about. And that is hate that after all I worked for, I can't take it with me. Now, I've seen some people die. I've seen some people get buried with... I seriously, I saw a picture of a man who loved his fishing boat, and they buried him in the fishing boat. They did. I mean, it was the sight to see. I saw a picture of it, but if it's been thought of, people have tried it. I can almost guarantee you that. But look what it says here in verse 17 through 21. "Therefore thy hated life." Man, it's just, you can just hear in his tone through his writing that he was very frustrated. "Because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherewith I have showed myself wise under the sun, this also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet to a man that hath not labored, therefore shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil." The Bible tells us in 1 Timothy chapter number 6, verse number 7, "For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out." That's what Paul said. So it doesn't matter how much is buried in that casket with you. It ain't going to go nowhere except for what's in that casket. I mean, people get buried with stuff, but people do it just for nice reasons. But You can't take anything with you. Frustration results when you compare the immediate to the ultimate. So he says here in verse number 19, there is no guarantee how your children will turn out. And oh boy, did he experience that with good old Rehoboam and what happened there. When a man works like a dog all his life to accomplish something, who is he going to leave it to? When a person receives something they did not have to work for, what happens? The tendency is to become undisciplined. That's what happens. Dedication is a result of character, and character is built through discipline. So we find here that Solomon, writing here, lo and behold, it happens to him. And who does it happen to? He gave everything to his unwise. I heard one commentator put it like this. He called Rehoboam Solomon's boneheaded son. That's what he called him. I mean, and he literally was. He was very unwise. He was very foolish in the decisions that he made. And he ruined it. He ruined what was built by Solomon here. And Solomon was writing here, and we see these things that he talked about here. Go back to what it says there. He says, then saith unto my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this is also vanity. And then he says, I believe it's here in verse number 18, yes. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto a man that shall be after me. It's Rehoboam, okay? I'm reminded of a story, John Harvard. John Harvard is the person who started Harvard University. Well, he was a fundamental believer when Harvard University was started, and he left his money to propagate the fundamental Christian faith. That's what John Harvard did. Well, today, if you look at Harvard University, you won't find fundamental faith within 10 yards of that university. They've departed from the faith. They're very liberal in their thinking, very liberal in their ways. And the money which Mr. Harvard left has become used for the very opposite of what he intended it to be for. Same thing. Solomon had worked, and there you see we talk about that. And then Rehoboam and how unwise he was. So he mentions this here in these verses. And then number 3, hate that nothing I accomplish is permanent. Look at verses 22 and through 23. For what hath man of all his labor and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. After all the sorrows, grief, working overtime, what do you have that is permanent? Nothing under the sun. Only that which is above the sun is permanent. That's the only lasting value. That's the only thing lasting that is important. And Solomon has become a pessimist. You see this in verse number 22 very clearly here. For what man of all his labor and the vexation of his heart, wherewith he hath labored under the sun? What difference does any of his attainments matter 5 minutes after he's dead? What do any of these things really actually matter? Someone has once said this, that if every card in our hand is going to get trumped, what does it really matter if we play the game to begin with? But we see this here in verses 24 through 26. Let's read these together here. And this is a very depressing picture. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was far from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten thereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner He giveth travail together and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. But why would God direct anyone to put such depressing stuff in the Bible? And we think and read this, and as you're reading through here, this isn't really a study to go through and do to find encouragement for the day, because this is Solomon just pouring out his heart here, sharing how all things are vanity, and this just is a very depressing set of statements here. But what's the point? Well, the point is, don't get depressed. The point is, look above the sun for fulfillment. Don't look in fulfillment for this life, because looking for fulfillment in this life will leave you unfulfilled and leave you very miserable. But looking for fulfillment above the sun will bring you that true contentment. And at the end of the chapter, there is a little glimmer of light. Solomon realizes satisfaction is possible. He says, who can eat or find wisdom, knowledge, and joy? God giveth. It is from the hand of God that these things come. Now Solomon is finally getting somewhere. Now he brings God into the actual picture. And this is where many people miss the boat. They look for joy in the material things of life. But these material things are temporary. Look for the thing that will bring you joy that is eternal. And that's of God. And that's what he touches on very briefly here. So what does this say? Well, look at this again. The capacity to enjoy the fruits of your labor is a gift from God. James 1:17 says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. It's a gift, not something that you can earn. It comes from God, not from your own personal efforts. Trying to grab happiness for yourself, it just does not work. Trying to find happiness in your own way, it just doesn't cut it. True happiness does not come by chasing what you don't have, but in being able to appreciate what you do have. There are so many people that are not content. They could have all the things that many people wish they did have and still not be happy. And we find this, and we've touched on that also briefly in this study about people that seem like they're happy and they have all these luxuries, but it's just a fact of wanting more and more, and under the sun there's no lasting enjoyment. How many people have all kinds of things but cannot enjoy them all? There's plenty of them. I'm reminded of this about John D. Rockefeller, couldn't say it, was an American industrialist who made his fortune in the oil industry. By the time of his death in 1937, Rockefeller's fortune was estimated at $1.4 billion. As a percentage of the United States economy, no other American fortune, not Bill Gates or Sam Walton of Wally World's fame, would even come close to John Rockefeller and what he accomplished. Yet all of Rockefeller's doctors, what they told him to do in his life was this, interesting, was for him to eat, which would cost only a few cents according to what he actually had monetarily in his finances. One of his biographers said he lived on a diet that a pauper would have despised. Weighing less than 100 pounds, he sampled everything at breakfast. He got a drop of coffee, a spoonful of cereal, a fork of egg, and one bit of pork chop about the size of a pea. That's not a lot. He was the richest man in the world, but did not have the ability to enjoy his food. Person that's the richest in the world. And you would think, well, they could buy anything. But he didn't. So we see the capacity to enjoy the fruits of your labor is a gift from God, but also those who are right with God will ultimately profit from the labor of others. In verse 26 again, for God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he giveth travail to gather and to heap up, that he might give to him that is good before God, and this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So we see Solomon is very depressed in his statements and his comments that he makes here as he writes. But we see a glimmer of hope of knowing that joy comes from above, of the sun. Not below, but above the sun, and that's how it truly comes. But this could be described as a man who just hated life, who was miserable. I'm talking about just so miserable, so irritated, so frustrated by trying to find the things of life that would bring him joy, but nothing could be found under the sun. And that's what he's talking about here as we close out chapter number 2. All right, got a few minutes here. What's some thoughts y'all have, some comments? Yeah. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of um, a man or a woman that is in love with their career and they have a family, but they sacrifice the family, they alienate themselves, and then they become so engrossed with their career that they miss out on spending time with their family, their kids. And who suffers from that? The kids, the family, and they're searching for this purpose. And many times people try to find their purpose in their careers. And nobody's going to find a purpose in their career. I mean, that's not going to bring lasting joy. That's something that's only temporary. So no one ever said on their deathbed, I wish I had spent more time at work. There we go. One thing I will leave you with tonight, and I think this is key for this chapter here, the last part, and that spoke to me a lot, just this one sentence here, is that frustration is the thwarting of purpose. And I think that's obvious. I know I'm revisiting this again, but it just spoke to me, and I don't know if it spoke to you or not. But I know when I get frustrated with things, I do lose focus on what I'm supposed to be doing. And getting frustrated with not finding joy will do that. And there are many people that are frustrated individuals because they're seeking the answers in the wrong places. And that just leaves you frustrated, leaves you empty and without hope. And so that just really spoke to me. As I was going through this study and reading through it, I just thought with Solomon, I mean, just the point, when you look at the language there of I hated life, he just was so discouraged, just so in vain of looking at his surroundings and just saying, vanity, vexation of spirit, those very just harsh words to use because he could not find that which is lasting in the things that he was searching for. Yeah. 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 Yes.
until it's done.
Yeah.
Because they're children. They haven't been, taught that, but not taught, but learned as an adult like we are, because we got so much that's built up into us over the years that frustrates us.
Yeah.
And it may be something, you build Legos, but you may be frustrated about something else that
Yeah.
making you walk away from the Legos.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic to think of how kids don't see you walk away, but then you'll come back and it'll be built.
Yeah. And for Titus's sake, right or wrong, it's going together. I found that out too. I had to do a lot of unbuilding to do it right. So that's it.
I think, this along with pretty much everything else in my life, you have to be purposeful, in your mindset and what you're doing. Because I'll do that same thing. Like I'm trying to better my family, give my son
Mm.
and my wife more things than I had. And you creep into that. Okay, well I'm working too many hours and I'm
Yeah.
neglecting the family, and then you go back to that, and then I have to retrain or keep beating it into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with stupid little things that I'll do, and just being purposeful and prayerful, and constantly asking God just to get it through my skull. But I don't think it's an aha moment and you're fixed. I think you just have to constantly work on it.
It is. Yeah. Anybody else with a thought?
I saw a funny picture once that talked about you can't take it with you, but it was a hearse going to, at the head of the line.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. The U-Haul.
You read my mind.
There it is. Yeah. The U-Haul. Yeah. There we go. Yep.
Say Kimberly will bury me with my stuff just to get rid of it.
That's right. Yeah. Never have to see it again.
I just maybe go to the, like to go to the state sales and pick up, stuff. We don't need that anymore, might be worth something.
Funny thing, we move into Wartburg. My father-in-law, he's a big collector, and I haven't told him this yet, but there's actually a store in Wartburg that's called the Junk Store. I'm gonna go visit it sometime to see. I mean, they've got bins out front for free, and then they got stuff you can buy inside. So, yeah. But hey, what's the old saying? One man's trash is another man's treasure. So, I don't know where it's a proverb or some saying, but yeah. What's that?
Gary said, we'll all be heading up there.
In the junk store. I didn't see it. I was actually driving around. We dropped Kinder off one morning for work, and I was coming back through, and I passed by, and I saw this little sign. And I said, "Did I see what that is?" So we just made a loop around. I come back and looked again, and lo and behold, junk store. I have to visit that someday and check out what they got. Kind of had that feeling like a Sanford and Son or something like situation. All the stuff they had. Oh man. All right. Anybody else? We got a few minutes here, and then we'll take some time to pray. Hopefully, this has been a blessing. It is a very depressing thing to read, but this is a man's personal pouring out his heart of what he searched for and what he was hoping to find, but he didn't find it. And this is what he shares here. And we're talking about the wisest man that lived. I mean, we know Jesus, obviously perfect, but the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon. So just coming from him, if he couldn't find it, he's wise and beyond what we probably can imagine. We're not going to find it either under the sun. It's only going to be above the sun that we find it through Jesus. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for being attentive, coming tonight. And we'll stand to our feet and we'll pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We thank you for this privilege to be here tonight. Thank you for this opportunity once again to dive deep into your Word. And I pray that as we continue on in this study that we will learn more about you, maybe learn some things and read some things about Ecclesiastes that we hadn't read about in a while and we haven't visited in a while. And I always love to do that, read passages and just to refresh things in our minds and in our hearts about things of your perfect Word. And Father, I pray for safety tonight as we travel home. We thank you tonight so much for the wonderful, precious gift of salvation, and that comes through Jesus Christ, your Son. We love you. Thank you once again and ask all these things in His name. Amen.